Hello, and welcome to our video audio podcast, Couched in Color. I'm your mental health expert, teen and young adult crusader, and psychological scientist, Dr. Alfiee. This podcast reflects my life's work, helping our young people and young at heart identify mental health challenges, disrupt negative patterns, and discover the best versions of themselves. I'm so happy that you've joined us. For over 20 years, I want you to know that I've had my finger on the pulse of BIPOC teen mental health. I recognize that historically and currently, with these dual pandemics of COVID and racial injustice raging, our young people are suffering, sometimes they're struggling, and always the care that they need is quite scarce. So each week, I'm joined by young people, mental health experts, celebrities, and influencers to help us uncover the secrets to healing the hearts and minds of our BIPOC teens, their families, and their communities. Here at Couched in Color, we believe deeply in spreading love and light, bolstered by culturally relevant science. So let's dive in. Hey fans, Dr. Alfiee here, bringing you the season finale, season 2 of the Couched in Color podcast with Dr. Alfiee. So we are a BIPOC mental health podcast, as you heard in the introduction. It's really focused on the needs of teens, young adults of color, BIPOC young people, the families and communities that love them. So I am so glad you came back for this final episode. This is take 2, because take 1 was all scratchy because I was trying to hide the daggone microphone. So we're gonna see this microphone today because that scratchiness was driving me nuts. I was like, we can make it work, we can make it work, we can make it work. Then I was like, nah, that ain't gonna work because it was getting on my nerves. So I'm really excited to be here to talk just super briefly. This will be like a quarter or a third of what the length of the episodes that I normally post. And remember, we're a video and an audio podcast. So we want you to please come subscribe on our YouTube channel. Tell everybody you know to subscribe because there's so much good content on here. There's so many cool people who come on. We've had influencers, we've had actors, we've had super mental health advocates, we've had app developers, we've had all kinds of mental health professionals and other health professionals. Like we just have had some of everybody, and everybody's super diverse, everybody on the podcast. So this season we brought you 22 episodes. Woo, child. Oh Lord, it was a lot of work. But it was my passion, right? And so like, anybody who's listening to me right now and watching, I want you to be encouraged. Because let me tell you where we had started at, what had happened was, where we started was, I had this vision 10, 11 years ago. Actually, the vision goes way back. It probably goes back to like 1997, 1998, when I told myself someday I'm going to have a platform where I can talk about the mental health needs of people who look like me and other people of color, and people who often are not, they have a voice, but their voice is not amplified in the right places so that everybody can have access to the powerful things that they're saying. So I said that way back like 97, 98. And here we are a long time later, 20 something years later, and I have a platform. And that chokes me up because it didn't have to be this way. Right? I had a very different career back then. And I had a very different career for a long period of time. And then I decided I want a career that's going to fulfill me and make me happy and take care of my mental health and not detract from my mental health. So I always joke now and say I'm a recovering academic. I did not envision myself as somebody with a platform until the last maybe couple of months, when people have said to me, even on the podcast, well, Dr. Alfiee, we really appreciate how you use your platform. And I'm like, platform? Who got a platform? I'm like, oh, I got a platform. Oh, okay, let's go then. And so this idea of I have a platform and I have a duty and a responsibility and a passion for it. My spouse told me over the weekend, I was sharing with him this grand vision that I have. And someday I'll probably get on the podcast and talk about what that grand vision is. But he said, oh, I hear you. And if you ever met him, like a person told me on my Instagram page, they were like, look, Dr. Alfiee, the fans want to know, who is this man? And he's not that kind of person. I feel like we're like Dolly Parton and her spouse. I've seen one picture ever of Dolly Parton's spouse. Like he is not about that life. And, she protects him and keeps him, out of the spotlight because that's his wish. I feel like that's the same with my spouse. I'm an extrovert. So, well, I'm an extrovert and an introvert, but more so an extrovert. I derive my energy from being with people and, being out and around people. And he derives his energy from really looking inward. And so he said to me, oh, babe, so what you want to do is you want to heal humanity. And I was like, dang. Right. So he's a PhD mathematician. He's going to go right for like, just go straight to the point. Right. And I'm all la la la, like flowers and roses and let's fly with the birds and all that. He's just like straight to the point. And he was right. That is what I want. I want to help heal humanity, especially for those of us who come from backgrounds where people have told us that who we are and what our needs are not important. Right. And they don't always say that stuff in overt ways. Sometimes it's covert. Right. A covert way that people tell you that in their mind who you are is not important. They don't develop mental health interventions with you in mind. Right. So all these treatments, I hear people talk about them. I'm not going to call them out. We know what the major treatments are. We don't have any evidence that says that those things work with people of color. Right. I'm saying this all the time and people look at me like I got three heads. Right. And I say things like, so you're telling me if somebody developed a new drug and they only tested it on, I'm going to pick a group, Asian Americans in the United States, and they only tested it on one group of Asian Americans, and they had great success, you're going to tell me that we would be in a position where the people who are charged with saying that drugs are safe would tell everybody they need to take that drug? No, they would not. And we know it. Because their argument would be, oh, well, this is a great start, but we really need to see how this works in all people. And we know what they mean when they say all people. It ain't really all people, right? And so that's what this podcast is about. This podcast is really about that life of there are people out here with all kinds of identities. All of those people deserve an opportunity. All of us deserve an opportunity for optimal mental health. And so why shouldn't I create a platform where all those people can come be on screen and be in your earbuds and be in your podcast, wherever you get your podcast fixed, and talk about their experiences, talk about what's important to them, because in them talking, they're going to touch somebody. So I think about where we started this season, Hannah and Charlie Lucas, both teenagers who developed an app, the Not Okay app. That's going to touch somebody. Them being very open about their experiences, being the only Black kids, almost the only ones in a high school, right? Everybody was white except for them, right? And the kind of stuff that people would say and do to them, right? And Hannah and Charlie are all over the place, right? They always have been, but they're all over the place now in terms of sharing their story and you learning more about who they are and the Not Okay app and why it's important. And it's important for young people like that to have a platform, right? My wish was that those kids had 1 million followers across all of their social media because they're out there also trying to heal humanity. I think about the people where mental health may not be their primary thing, but they come on to the podcast and they're able to shine a light so that everybody can see themselves in who we are and what we do as part of this podcast. Who we are and what we do in relationship to these amazing people like Ryan Mitchell, and Cheryl Lazar, right? Cher's Canadian, she's white. Ryan's from the South, he's Black and gay, very out, very proud, right, of who he is. And both of them are very open, talking about their mental health coming from very different perspectives. What they share is they're both celebrities, right? We've had other celebrities on the podcast. We've had influencers on the podcast. I think about people like the Sad Girls Club founders, right? They have this huge platform and lots of people follow Brienne and Elise and everything that they do. I think about people like, and I'm not going to name everybody. So if I don't name you, it's not because you're not important to me. It's just, I'm really just trying to give people a flavor for all the different kinds of people we've had on the podcast. But I think about activists, right? We've had activists on here like David Johns, who is very vocal about the needs of our young people who are Black and queer and LGBT. And as he says, same gender loving, right? It's important for young people, for anybody to see David being who he is, well educated. He's getting a PhD, finishing it up. Very proud of who he is, very open and honest about who he is, and very open and honest and completely unapologetic about what he believes young people need with the organization that he serves as the executive director for, the National Black Justice Coalition. All of those kinds of folks coming on here from all those different backgrounds and walks of life and professions, it's important because the thread that ties all of this together is that we all have mental health needs, all of us. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're Ryan Pete and you come from a famous family, and in your own right, you are a musician who also graduated from my alma mater, New York University, one of 4 alma maters I have. But to have her come on and really teach me about what it means to set your own pace, right? And if you need to take a step back from something, take a step back. You don't owe other people an explanation. You're taking care of yourself. As well, one of my buddies, he knows I adore him. He's like maybe like somewhere between a baby brother, a nephew. He probably is young enough to be my child. My children are still teenagers. Landon Moss, right, whom I met through his sister. And Landon is an actor, a director, a content producer. He's fantastic, right? And hilarious. So you should go follow him on social media, particularly on Instagram. But, mental health is not the primary thing that he does, but he was willing to come on and talk about it as a Black man. I think about other Black men I've had on this podcast, Dr. Joseph Leday, who is a physician, right? Who already was a doctor. The brother got a PhD, then went back and said, well, I'm going to get this medical degree. And now is in the process of completing a medical. I think he's a 3rd-year medical student at Tulane, and founded an organization called the 15 White Coats to bring other young people into science and medicine. Just phenomenal. And then I think about the points of diversity for people who come on the podcast who are not Black like me. Right, that's the name of a book, in case you didn't know. An old book from back in the day. I think it was published in the 60s. But for me, it's important because I want all young people to know that anybody who's caring, right? I talk less about racial matching and more about empathy matching, although in many cases, racial matching is important. Don't get me wrong, because we're seeking out that cultural competence. And sometimes there's something innate about having a shared background that allows you to understand each other and relate to each other in ways that other people cannot unless they choose to work at it, which is some hard work. So I just think about Juan Acosta, who was later in the season, in season 2, and who's young, also probably young enough to be my child, but who is Latinx and a member of the LGBTQ community, and also was someone who's recognized by Lady Gaga and her mom's foundation, Born This Way, and the Channel Kindness book, which you can see that bottom one down there is, if you're watching the video, I have a stack of books behind me, and it's the bottom book, Channel Kindness. Shouts out to Born This Way Foundation because they sent me that book. Oh, and Maya, I know I'm gonna say her last name wrong, Anista, the CEO, such a sweetheart, like one of the loveliest people ever. So all kinds of people have come on this podcast, and it's been important for me to have all kinds of people because I need young people to see that all kinds of people deal with mental health concerns or help people with mental health concerns. One thing that's been really important for me, even though we know that at the podcast, we're a BIPOC focused, a young people of color focused podcast, is to have white folks on who are allies and who are comrades, right? And as the new terminology is going, who are fellow abolitionists. Are they trying to do away with all the destructive things in terms of structural racism and discrimination that many people who are of color find ourselves constantly bumping up against, right? So I think about Dr. Deborah Budding, who is a neuropsychologist who has amazing expertise in neurodivergent communities, who knows a lot about autism and who taught me a lot about language and just how do we support people, and how do we use our language in a way to lift people up and not tear them down, intentionally or unintentionally. And then 3 girls who I told them they're adopted. They got a Southern mama. They live in Canada and they're obviously Canadian, but they are from an amazing family. Shouts out to Kim, with the McGregor girls, Elle, Ava, and Madison, whom I also met through social media. I was a guest on Madison, Ava, and Elle's podcast, oh God, maybe 3 years ago. And we've just stayed in touch, and it's grown into a really a beautiful friendship. I think Kim and I are the same age, their mom, and they're just lovely people. And having them come on and talk about who they are as young women, even as young white women, and what it means to them to be authentic allies to people of color and people who are LGBTQ and people with disabilities, That's important. That can be healing for some people, because there's some folks out there who are like, well, I don't know no white people who are nice, right? Or who are going to stand in allyship. And it's important that our young people see, of course there are, right? Of course there are. And we want to create that image and messaging and help young people understand what to look for in an authentic ally, right? People have to show you who they are before they tell you who they are. And it's just as important for you to listen to who people are as it is for you to watch what they do. And so that watching piece is critical, because people can tell you a whole lot, but it's that seeing how their behavior and whether or not it matches the words. That's what's important, particularly when it comes to finding people to trust, to support you with your mental health. So in all these ways, having the diversity of thought, having the diversity of representation, physical representation. That's why this being a video podcast is also so important. And I'm hoping that, you know, the dream I had in 1997, 1998, when I decided I wanted somewhere in the future, I wanted a platform where I could talk about these things openly, honestly, and as the young folks say, unapologetically, right? So when you come on here, I don't ask you to censor yourself. You say what you got to say, because I want all of us, myself included, to have a space where we can talk about who we are authentically and where we can amplify voices that are generally not amplified elsewhere. So I'm just so grateful to all my guests. I have learned so much from all of them, and I'll share with you in closing a couple of things that I've learned. One thing I've learned is if you have a dream, you owe it to yourself to pursue it. I talk about this on my social media all the time. Your dream is yours. It doesn't belong to anybody else, right? So I've heard Steve Harvey say, you don't have to tell everybody what your dream is, right? Because some people you're going to tell your dream and they're going to poo-poo it, be like, ooh, I don't know about all that, right? So everybody should not be privileged with holding the beauty of your dream. That's for you. And this podcast was my dream, right? The video platform was part of my dream, right? My goal is one day Couch to Color gonna show up on TV, right? Because it's important, right? These conversations are really important. And I've been at this with the podcast at this point 2 years and a little bit of change. And it has been joyful for me. Another thing I've learned is to sort of live my values, right? So some of the people who've come on the podcast, I've learned from them how to live from the same space that you pull your passion from, right? So your life, your behavior, your actions mirrors what's inside of you. A dear childhood friend, Dr. Charles Forprue, is one of those people. His episode is super powerful in terms of talking about like being super vulnerable as a Black man and talking about that arc of change and what pushed him in that direction. There's so many people who come on the podcast and really just been very open and honest about their own struggles, about their own triumphs, about their own passions and their own conviction for doing the work that they do, or for being the people who they are, or for fighting through mental health concerns in a way that is authentic and has been beneficial to them. So I've learned that. And the final thing, I learned a whole lot, but the final thing I'll mention today is that it's really important to have open and honest conversations about mental health. What can I say? Right? If I'm not open and talking about the fact that I have a family history of anxiety, and child, let me tell you, generalized anxiety disorder, that is me all day. But also talking about how I manage that through active, regular, persistent, inconsistent meditation, Freudian slip. Then, why am I here? Right? So being a chocolate girl, a Black woman, clearly African-American, very proud of the fact that I'm African-American, but I shout out my Choctaw Grandma Rena, Mississippi Band of Choctaws. If I'm not honest about what it means for me as a Gen X woman who grew up not talking about these things, this wasn't something we talked about in Gen X. And I'm always shouting out millennials and Gen Z because they opened the doors and really gave space for us to talk about it. But one thing I did acknowledge today that I'm going to acknowledge again is that these Gen Xers and some of the baby boomers who are the parents of millennials in some way created space for millennials to go out and be who they are and to go out there and be forceful and vociferous about we need to take care of mental health everywhere, right? And then millennials created space as the parents, right? Gen X and millennials created space as the parents of our Gen Zers to pick up the mantle and push it way further along. And so I'm just grateful to all of my Gen X, Gen Z, and millennial guests for showing up and really teaching us, there's my puppy, teaching us about what it means to be a person of color, to be an authentic ally, comrade, or abolitionist, fellow abolitionist, and to be authentically who you are in all points of diversity, LGBT and disabled. I have to shout out my final guest. He was just so lovely. A person with a disability, Justin Graves of He's on Wheels. Talk about a way to end the season with brightness and light. And he just is phenomenal. He's just an amazing human being. Sorry for the noise. So what I'll say to you in closing is the same thing that I always say. I'm wishing you lots of love and light. I'm hoping that it's always informed by good culturally relevant science. I really hope that you will come back for season 3. We already have some amazing guests lined up for season 3. We're going to be back probably August, September of 2021. So it'll be this year. We'll be on hiatus in between because it's a lot of work, y'all. Shoot, this is episode 23, and we did all this in about 6 months. So it's been cooking. But we want to thank you for hanging in there with us. We want to thank you for watching. I want to ask you again, please subscribe, particularly to the video YouTube channel, Couched in Color. You can Google it. It's real easy to Google, or you can go to our Instagram page. We have a Twitter page. We have an Instagram page. All of those have links. We have a Facebook page back to the YouTube channel. We also obviously are on all podcast outlets. So if you're listening, continue to listen. Share it with people. Like, we want people to listen to, because most of what you're going to hear is not me. It's going to be those guests, because I don't tend to talk a lot when my guests are on. You rarely hear my voice when my guests are on. Every now and then I'll get a little long-winded because somebody will touch a nerve, like Dr. Joseph Leday and I went on a rant because we were talking about academic medicine, and child, don't even get me started on that, because it ain't nothing nice, like I always say. So I'm a recovering academic. I'm going to be a recovering academic forever and ever. So just thank you for who you are, even though I can't see you, for leaving comments, for encouraging us, for reminding us that what we do is important with the podcast. Maybe get on our Instagram page, either me, Dr. Alfiee, or Couched in Color, the podcast page, Instagram page, and tell us who you want to see on the podcast. So I'm wishing you just goodness and just joy. And even when you don't feel joy, I'm wishing you perseverance until you can get back to your joy. So thank you again so much for being with us on the podcast at Couched in Color with Dr. Alfiee. Thank you for sharing my dream and my vision with me. And I am totally looking forward to bringing you an incredible, stupendous, outstanding season 3. Take care. So there you have it. That's a wrap for another episode of Couched in Color. We want you to know that we deeply value you, all of our viewers and our listeners, and everyone out there working to support optimal mental health, both for themselves and for our young people. And one of the best ways you can help our movement is by leaving us a 5-star review on our YouTube channel and everywhere you enjoy your audio podcasts, and by sharing our podcast with a friend. Please also tag us while you're out there listening and watching. Finally, head on over to dralfiee.com for more information about me, www.acomaproject.org for information about my nonprofit. And those are the places you can go to learn more about how you can help, which is that I'm wishing you lots of love, lots of light, and that I'm hoping it is always, always informed by good, culturally relevant science. Take care.